I start asking you all of these like really specific things, I was actually hoping that you could sort of speak to the idea of like, we can do all of these like little tiny, like really specific movements and everything, but I still fully believe in like those more like full flows that like that you did for us and that, you know, you have on the site and all of that. I feel like it's great to have like the couple exercises that you add in, but I still think there's so much value in like a few sun salutations.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And so when I'm putting together like even a class that's not meant to be for athletes, just meant for like general pop, I typically think about it in terms of uh, reaching and exploring as much range of motion as is available at the time. So that could be very little for some people in different ranges and a lot for others. And so I try to keep a lot of room for people to explore like wherever they are. So that being said, I try to start with just like sort of any basic warm up and allow people to move around. So I encourage them to have some free movement in there, whether it's just really simply in like cat cow and then like wiggle around or, you know, move your wrist or something like this. And then we start getting into a little bit more structured work, you know, careful forward folds at first. I'm assuming that people like are just folding all the time or rounding their spine. And so the discs in the front of the spine are pretty loaded up to begin with. And so they don't need any more of that. And they certainly don't need any rotation to go along with that. So I'll try to get some like extension through the spine in a supportive manner, stand up for a little bit, which just feels like good right away. And then move into like some kind of easier vinyasas, like some easy lunges, planks, lower, little cobra action, down dog. And after we step through a couple of those, then I'll start to add in some open hip lunges, neutral hip lunges. And this is in and out of like vinyasa. The speed and intensity varies depending on like who's in the room and what the needs are, what time of day we're practicing, stuff like that. And then get into some twists, some balancing. And then I typically then get in maybe some back bending or deeper quad stretching. And by then that's so like intense and that takes a pretty good amount of time. So then we'll come down to the mat. I don't do a ton of seated postures. They can be really frustrating, really, really challenging. So depending on what we're doing and the group, I might just skip seated altogether and go down to supine and do some stuff on the ground, a little bit more hip opening, definitely some twists, and call it a shavasana. Sometimes I'll add some like inversion work and some arm balances, but it's like again like depends on the group and the need. That I don't feel that that's like needed in a daily practice, and in fact, it could go the other way. People might feel intimidated and might mess the whole like flow up.
Totally. Actually, that's you kind of led me to one of the questions I sort of had is what's your recommendation as far as athletes and back bends go? Because I know, especially for cyclists, when they're so hunched over, it's like anything like more than this like tiny tilt back is like A, it's intimidating, and then B, I feel like especially when it's like you're doing it solo, you're not in a class, no one's like helping you with it, or you're doing a virtual class, it's like what pose is like the safest, I guess?
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Locust. And this is true for like yoga for office workers too. I just heard that term the other day and I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. So Locust Pose, and I'll show it to you in a second, but that's also going to depend on like the degree of range of motion that's available. And that can be different for everybody. Like my husband, he's a cyclist and he can just like hang out in like a full like Sphinx and like bend a knee and he can just like chill there, like watch television. And I'm like, where are you right now? I don't even understand this. But Sphinx is a good one too, especially if you do it in like the form of yin. So like quite literally just really passive, just kind of like allowing the front of your spine to open up. Now, the caveat with that is sometimes before we can get to the spine, oftentimes before we can get to the spine into extension, we need to address quads and the front of the hip extending, as well as chest, right? Like we're this all the time. So our pec muscles, our pec minors, they're always like shortened and contracted, whereas the back of the body is so overstretched and weak that we need to balance out that muscularity. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that even like that kind of goes back to what I was asking before, where it's like, no, we can't just do our wrists. We have to like kind of go up from that and like, okay, we're now looking at shoulders, and okay, now we're looking at chests, and it just it's hard to just do the one thing.
Can I demo and explain to you what I mean by locust? Because it's a perfect way to get to it. So
yes, I would love that.
If I can get you, there we go. All right, so if we're coming down here, and locust, there's a lot of different variations, but I think a mistake is thinking about where the hands go, right?
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, they're lifted and it looks like it's a perfectly fine locust, which it is, but you're gonna get more, you're gonna hit the target in the upper back and more of the muscles that you wanna strengthen if you kind of like, and this is how I address it, lift the shoulders first. So lift the collarbones, don't even lift the chest yet. Lift the collarbone, squeeze the upper back. You can even let the elbows bend so they can lift. And then because the upper back is so strong right now, the hands just can float, lower body as well. And then the head just comes along for the ride, which is very different than this, right?
Ooh, yeah. No, that's such a good cue. I love that.
I mean, this is far more useful, in my opinion, than like upward facing dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more accessible too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people also will buy into locust more because it feels like an ab workout. So like, you're getting that too.
You're getting your erectors in the whole line of the spine. You're getting some glutes and some hamstrings. And there's virtually no way to like cram up your low back, which is a common complaint in like cobra and upward facing dog and other, especially prone back bends, but back bends generally. So yeah. I find locust to be like so important. And then again, if like somebody's not wanting to do work, or if it's like their race season or like heavy training season, simple like passive Sphinx, like a yin Sphinx would work. So you can do this even without any props. Yin usually has like some propping, but Sphinx, you just hang out. You're like,
I love it.
It's great, right? Now, the thing with Sphinx is you want to put yourself in a position, or not Sphinx, I'm sorry, Yin, is you want to put yourself in a position to feel some sensation, but like very, very tolerable. And then depending on how long you want to stay, you might deepen it. And again, like my husband will just hang out. He's like, what's the big deal? I'm like, yeah. But so for some people, this could be Sphinx, and they might have like a pillow under the chest. Like this might be enough. Legs might be together. This is going to intensify it. This is going to decrease, typically speaking, but everybody's different. What you don't want to do is like jam yourself up into a position that's barely tolerable and then expect yourself to hang there. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're just stressing out your system more. That being said, some people might be very comfortable here. I'm not, so I'm going to come out.
Yep. Yeah, every time I do like a morning thing, I'm always like, okay, we're going to do like a baby cobra. Like just a tiny baby cobra, and we're good. That's really all we need.
Yeah, and build from there, because you want to have that like the emphasis in the right place, and then build it as you start to wake up and build strength, because that's a hard posture. High cobra, upward facing dog, don't even get me started.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So actually one of the questions we got asked by like 5 different people were wrists for cyclists. Like to the point where they actually have trouble being in downward dog for anything more than like a couple seconds, because it's just such an intense thing for them. So how would you have them warm that up?
Because of pressure in like the wrist and the carpal tunnel? Is that what you're meaning?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things for that. So what I would say is first,
I get into my yin Sphinx here. Yeah, so I made myself very uncomfortable all of a sudden.
So first I would say, like, look at how you're utilizing your hand on the mat to begin with. So first things first, I would say, make sure that your fingers are spread nice and wide, and then have, as kind of a general rule of thumb, the index fingers pointing straight ahead. So they'll be parallel to one another. And you could even like cheat that out like a little bit more to give yourself a little bit more space. And then the other thing with that is, look at how you're utilizing the strength of your forearms. And cyclists especially, like, they are so strong in their forearms from like braking and shifting and just like handling the bike, that they're going to have a lot of strength to be able to press down into those fingertips and like the knuckles of the fingers, like right where they meet the palms of this rim, so that you get this nice little doming up here. And that kind of doming up will continue through the carpal tunnel here. So it'll keep it lifted. So it's not gonna be like lifted like this, but just like ever so slightly, maybe this is a better, ever so slightly, so that there's more weight in the front of the hand. That's also indicative of better shoulder posture. So I'm gonna move to my mat again and show you just an example of what I mean. So, you know, oftentimes we'll see like puffy fingers and like collapsed into the outer base of the wrists. And that's telling me that like the shoulder blades are coming down and off the back of the body, so that your neck is probably not feeling too great here. And this is not sustainable. This is like, I hate this pose, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, I would have, again, like hands as wide as outer shoulders, fingers spread really wide, index fingers pointing straight ahead, maybe ever so slightly out to the side of the mat. And then I would actually have people lift their armpits up away from the mat, even if that means they have to shift forward a little bit, lift them up towards their ears, press into the finger pads, root down into the knuckles of the fingers where they meet the palms. And then from there, provided they can keep it, just shift back a little bit. So not all the way out to dump the armpits out, like keep them sort of hidden a little bit. Because what that means is then the shoulder blades are on the back of the body versus off. Mm-hmm. Right? Does that make some sense?
Yeah. No, that's such a good cue. And I think like a lot of the time, you know, you're saying like, oh, my wrist's hurting down or dog, but you're not actually thinking about what your hands are doing.
Yeah. Right.
Just kind of like they're on the floor, like done.
Jam them in. Yeah. The other thing, if that's still not working, and if there are folks who are having like actual carpal tunnel issues or some other complication, what you could do is like they make these fancy like little wedge foamy guys, which can help. But if you're not interested in like buying extra things for a practice that you begrudgingly do from time to time, I get it. Or I don't really I understand. What you could do is have them roll the mat up as much as they want or need, and then pop their wrists up onto that little bit of height so that the fingertips are pointing down already, and it'll kind of do that for them. Does that make sense?
Ooh, yeah, that's good. I love that.
Yeah.
That's easy, yeah. And then outside of downward dog, are there any like wrist specific things that you would do? I know some people are big into like anything that's gonna like push your wrist like this, but I feel like there's got to be some like catch to doing that properly without like snapping something.
I don't know. I think your bones will just stop you. So as long as you like pay attention to the bone feeling, you're not likely to hurt yourself. And it could be just really simply like this. You know, I might have people come down and I'll be like telling them some silly story or like about the next pose, or maybe I'm demoing and have them like do something like this, or they could even do it in here we are, like a tabletop. Right? The other thing that I sometimes do, if that's a concern, is like this is a fun game.
I love this.
Like in a thread the needle or something. I think you still can't see my hand, but just kind of moving the wrist around in a different way. So like this, right? So they don't have to stay static in the posture. They could just be like moving and getting some space that way. I just have this other one that I have to share with you because it's kind of like my favorite. So in any kind of, so you could do it like this way or this way. I think it's Marichiasana, like A or B or something like this. I like to have the person, yeah, so
Just gonna casually get my stretch on here while you're doing it.
yeah, do it with me. So whichever arm is coming around the bent leg, that hand is gonna hold the, just above the little bony protrusions of the wrist, so at the palm or at the base of the wrist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's gonna hold it, it's gonna just grip it, and then I'm gonna pull this is my right arm, my right elbow back and towards my ribs, and it's actually gonna traction my wrist. You feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I make this mistake a lot. I said above the bony protrusions, but I meant like below, closer to your hand. Yes, right there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, because you get also like some shoulder blade action, which we can use more of.
Seriously. I mean, this is kind of leading neatly into the next topic of just like every cyclist has garbage posture off the bike. So how can we use yoga, especially like when you're, okay, you're typing, then you're writing, then you're writing, then you're typing, then you're texting. How do we back out of that?
Yeah, well, like we spoke about before, so Locust is going to be huge. And anything that made you do what you just did. So that's
I'm like talking to you because that's like the time I start getting into better posture. I'm like, oh, I'm talking to a person who does yoga. I should probably sit up straighter.
Yeah, so anything that's going to engage like the lower trap. So if you think about it more so like the bones orienting towards one another. So the shoulder blades, like they're two triangles with the like points at the bottom, right? So if you think about those two, oh, my hands could be that, my little hooves. So if you think about like the bottom corners, they are typically kind of like out and like winging away from one another. So what we want to do with our muscle contraction is like pull the bottom tips in towards one another and in towards the rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
So a pretty easy way to get to that would be, I like to add it into lunges. So if I have like just like a simple low crescent lunge, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you interlace your fingers and bring your hands to the back of your head. Yep. And then widen your elbows.
Mm-hmm.
Squeeze your upper back. And then take a big inhale, puff up your chest. And then exhale, start to press your head back into your hands as you keep squeezing those shoulder blades in. And then to counterbalance, just start to bend your right knee in equal amounts forward and wide as you lower the pelvis. So you get some extension in the hip and the spine as well. Mm-hmm. And then inhale to come back up and out. And just release it all down.
Oh, that's nice. I feel like I don't actually I need to spend more time in lunges. It's something I don't do like that often. I'm always kind of like flowing through them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then I like sit and I'm like, oh yeah, this hits a lot of the points that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I struggle with lunges too, because not unlike yourself, I do a lot of leg work. I'm running, I'm cycling, and like, I find it frustrating to like stay in postures. In fact, when I get to classes and they're like, okay, we're going to spend a lot of time holding poses, I'm like, ugh, it's so challenging. So I like to give the rest of my body something else to do. So another way you could do this is in like side angle pose. So warrior 2 is like my nemesis. It's so much work in this front leg. I just want to get out as soon as I get in. So if you take your, take your right forearm onto your right thigh. Yep. And just push down into your right forearm to lift your chest up towards the ceiling. And then bend your left elbow and just bring your hand to the back of your head, very similar to what you did in your low crescent. And then press your head straight back.
Ooh.
And then start to turn it up towards the ceiling.
Ooh, hello, shoulder blade.
How about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to bring you some awareness to that shoulder blade and open the chest. So now squeeze the muscles in the back of your shoulder blade, like by the spine. And whoa, right?
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh, I love that. That might be my new favorite.
That's like a whoa, good morning.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like cactus arms, sort of like one of these guys, like lat pull down-esque.
And that's like an easy one to do at your desk. Like, you don't have to get up.
Yep. Very easy. And it again, like you can trick yourself into hanging out in lunges, like warrior one, like extend the legs straight and then bend and bend. Right, and kind of pump that.
I like it. It's almost Jane Fonda does yoga-esque.
And the improvement, yeah.
I'm into it. And then the other one that I wanted to get us to touch on is the generic ye old tight hips of cyclists and runners. What are your favorite, like, especially like lazy yoga poses for tight hips?
So the first one that comes to mind is, again, another yin posture. It's become one of my favorites. I just taught it actually before we got on here. It's called deer pose. So it's sort of akin to pigeon pose. So if you sit sort of like side saddle and then bring, would that be your left knee forward? Yeah, just like that, so that you're comfortable enough. And then sit up really tall, turn your chest towards your left knee. So you're a little bit of like an open twist, and then just fold over that and prop yourself up however you want or need.
Oh, so it's like I like this. It's like a different take on pigeon, or like, and you're bored of pigeon, because I feel like I spend so much time in pigeon.
Yeah,
This
and
is like a
really good pose, although it's getting a lot of flack right now because we're finding that, I don't know if I said this when we spoke before, but particularly in females, there's some instability in the SI joints that we're finding out about, that these like asymmetrical forward folds are exacerbating, and people don't typically know about it until like the next day or something. So it's almost hard to figure out in the moment. So this is the least intense version. So now if you lift yourself up and turn yourself a little bit more in line with, or like more perpendicularly to your front shin and fold, you're gonna feel a different aspect of the hip there.
Ooh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so hello.
A midi, and then if you sit up again, and then move your front foot a little bit forward so that your shin is a little bit more like, say, if you were on a mat, it would be parallel to the top edge of the mat.
Okay.
And then slide your hips a little bit closer to your right heel. Is that okay with your knee?
Yep.
Okay, great. So sit up tall again, and then start to hinge over that front shin.
Ooh. I am like pathetically stuck here. I'm like a couple inches down.
Well, you know, and here, I think this is also important to address regarding this question is with hip opening and some of these poses that our bones are different, right? Our bones are shaped and oriented differently in our bodies. So sometimes like it's not a lack of flexibility or neglect, or like there's no like moral quality to the depth of a pose. It's sometimes just like your bones stop, they get in the way. Like certain forward folds with a twist, my ribs hit my pelvis. Like there's no point in me like damaging my rib to get deeper into the fold, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to show you one more aspect here. So from this exact position, is your right heel pretty close to your right hip? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Pick your hips up and then like tuck your butt under and land down on your buns. I'm going to spin to the side so you can kind of see. Right? And then just walk your hands back, and this could be plenty. right? This could be plenty quad opener depending on who you are and what you've done.
Ooh, yeah, that's nice.
Right? It's kind of like a sneaky little half hero pose. If that feels okay, or somebody has more range of motion, they could come down to the same leg. So this is my left leg, the same leg's elbow. So left and left. And then to take any strain out of the neck, I like to look down to that same side. Yeah, so you're gonna go on your right and then look down right. And then you might just push into your left fingertips a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's so nice.
It's so nice, right? It's easy to get in and out of, which is another thing that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people will be able to lay all the way down and be totally comfortable. Others just never will, and they don't have to.
No, I like that a lot. Oh, and so you mentioned earlier the seated postures and how you tend to skip them. I wonder if we could kind of finish this out with talking about seated forward folds, because mine is embarrassing. Like I'm gonna demonstrate, because I'm always like this, you know, like to me, like this is actually like one of the hardest things I have to do. It's like this sitting upright like this, and if I'm like not trying to just like do this guy, and I'm trying to like actually like go straight, this is literally as far as I can get.
That's fine.
And like I'm shaking.
Yeah.
So could you please explain to people why we do not want to on our forward folds?
You're not alone. You are not alone by any means. So the problem with forward folding is, again, when the spine is rounding forward, the discs in the spine are in the front. So when we're rounded, we're putting pressure in the discs, and those are the things that push out and then like aggravate the nerves and give us all the sciatica and the neck pinches and things like this. So we're in this position all the time. We don't need to add to it, frankly. So what we need to do actually is engage the back and engage the hamstrings. Now, because we sit on our hamstrings and our glutes, they tend to be inhibited. So they tend to like just not fire as quickly. And they tend to be like sort of dry in terms of circulation. And when that's happening, they're already pulling the pelvis under. So a lot of times when people, I have the opposite just from gymnastics, but most people have this like tucked under pelvis things because their hamstrings are attached to the pelvis and they pull it under. So already they have this flexed spinal situation. And then we ask them to forward fold and they're just going to do more of that. And then they're going to tug at these like dried out tissues, right? And we end up with hamstring problems. Anyway, that aside, what you could do is when you're seated, you could, so my teachers always like to say like move the flesh and like the tissue and find your sitting bones. And that's like, okay, but I prefer actually to kind of pick my leg up and like scoot my thigh bone back. It moves my pelvis back. So what's gonna happen when the pelvis moves back? Now I'm more forward on my sitting bones, which tips the pelvis forward and gives you that lumbar, that neutral lumbar curve, right? Now you're probably doing a ton of work. Bend your knees a little bit, but flex your feet. And does that feel better?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then sit up tall from there. So you keep that neutral spine and hinge only at the hips to tolerance. And then just pause. And you could always like, depending on how much work you want to do, keep something underneath your knees and you could press down into it. The other thing you could do, if you can maintain that low back curvature, is hold on to the edges of the mat and like make like you're going to slide them back underneath your butt. And then that's going to move your chest forward. Right?
Okay.
Like having it hang back, it's going to move it forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the like shifting your feet, because usually when I talk about forward folds from standing, I'm always saying like bring your hips back as you come down.
Yeah.
And that's basically what you're doing seated, but like normally you just wouldn't even use that cue. So that's such a handy way to add that cue back in.
Yeah. So what makes it hard when you're sitting is that the legs are fixed unless you choose to move them. And we often don't. And there's this, there are all these weird, like pictures that we have in our heads about like what these poses are supposed to look like. So like if we're seated and the legs are bent, like that's not okay, right? And like of course it's okay.
Yeah.
Like what's your point in doing the posture? I mean, it depends on that. But you know, we're very resistant to doing those things. So yeah, the legs are fixed, which makes it harder to like manipulate the angles of the spine to get them how you want. And the other thing that can happen if you like insist on stressing that posture of the rounded spine and the straight legs, particularly if you're holding your feet, you can actually stretch out the nerves. You can like, do you know the difference? Like, have you felt this, Molly? Like the difference between like stretching like soft tissue, like muscle, tendons, things like this, and like stretching your nerve. Have you ever felt that?
Yeah.
Like an icky feeling.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot to like really irritate nerves to an extent that like they are like, remember, you irritated me. I'm never going to go away. I'm never going to go. That's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay, before we wrap up, maybe just explain what the Valley Om has as far as like the virtual library and how people can access it, so that they can go get more from you if they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the virtual Om is sort of like a subcategory of the Valley Om, just played on our name. The virtual Om has all different kinds of videos available on demand. So anytime you want to, you know, pop some yoga in, you can do that. And last week we actually released a whole collection of like shorties. So we have one up for balancing. We have like a little chair yoga shorty. We have a yin shorty. We have a crow pose demo shorty. So those are all like 8 minutes long or something. So you have any length of like 8-minute video to like a 45, 50-minute video, named appropriately so that you know what you're getting into in terms of what style of yoga, the intensity. So yoga flow, yin, restorative. Some are very just like general, well-rounded classes. Others are more specific, and that's indicated in the name. And so you can subscribe. It's a monthly or quarterly subscription, and you can find that through thevalleyom.com, just on our pricing page. And here in the studio, we're doing all those same things. So sometimes it's a general flow, and sometimes it's dictated by who's in class and what they're needing. And other times it's something that's more specific, like maybe there's a peak pose that we're working towards, and we'll kind of vinyasa our way or modified vinyasa our way to get there, build all the components of the posture, try it out, and then balance out and relax before we move back out into the crazy